Elshere's case is typical. Most nerds start off with fantasy media and video games, only to wonder if D&D has a kick. It does. It only takes a few seconds for them to realize they can't leave it alone. For any of you still confused, this is your brain. And this is your brain on D&D. Makes you think, doesn't it? Hello, adventurer. If you've been sent this video, odds are you've been asked to create your first character for Dungeons & Dragons. The problem is, taking one look at the character sheet we use in D&D, and, well... there is an awful lot going on here, but don't worry. Whether you want to play a classical elf ranger, an edgy tiefling rogue, or even a plasmoid gunslinger, in this video, we're going to work through character creation step by step, and then explain your finished character sheet. So whatever you end up with, you'll understand the choices you've made, what they mean mechanically, and most importantly, you'll have made a character that you actually enjoy playing. Ready? Let's roll. Before we jump into the details, let's quickly remind ourselves what Dungeons & Dragons actually is. At its heart, D&D is a role-playing game where you control a character in a magical, fictional world. This might be one that your DM has written themselves, or could be a pre-written adventure. Simply put, you make role-playing choices, rolling dice and adding modifiers to determine the outcome, whilst working with other players to collaboratively create an epic story together. Before you begin creating a character, you should really talk with the other players and your dungeon master about what characters would work best in the party and the setting, as well as what levels your characters will be actually playing at. The whole point of D&D is to work together. No character is good at everything. You need to decide as a team which players' characters will be at the front of combat, tanking hits and fighting enemies, whilst others fling spells and arrows from the sidelines. Equally, there might be social encounters, where a character who is charming and persuasive would take centre stage. You could need a healer, or someone who can navigate through the forest, tracking a monster. All of this depends on the campaign too. There's little point making a character who is an expert at dungeon delving when the DM has a seafaring adventure in mind. You also need to contemplate what kind of character you'd actually be interested in playing. Are one of the members of the Fellowship of the Ring a personal favourite of yours? Perhaps you've been binging The Mandalorian and want to play a metal-clad bounty hunter. Having a basic premise can help create the foundations of a great character. To properly begin all of this, you'll have to start on a character sheet. To create a character in D&D Beyond, there are 5 simple steps. These are class, background, species, abilities, and equipment. All of these could potentially change after conversing with your party. So today, we'll view this as a kind of first draft, a time to explore options and ideas. If, for now, you're just tentatively interested in playing D&D, this video will help explain the confusing elements of starting off. But if you're ready to create your first character now, you can put me in another tab and we'll go through this process together. After all, D&D is about teamwork. Traditionally, you'd have had to fill out a paper character sheet yourself, but luckily we have tools like D&D Beyond now, which make things a lot easier. To begin creating your character, log into D&D Beyond and hover over your display picture in the top right of the screen. Then click the Characters button. This will take you to the My Characters page, where you can then select Create a Character. You'll then be given a few options on how to create one, from pre-made to quick build, but for the sake of scope, today we'll go with standard. This first page is where you can name your character and do unbelievably technical things like decide if coin weight adds to your encumbrance. We hate this page, and as long as your DM hasn't specifically stated anything about it, skip to the next one as soon as possible. This will take you to the class page. Think of your class as a kind of archetype. They are fairly self-evident if you've had any interaction with the fantasy genre. The class defines what your character does and shapes your playstyle. Do you want to get up close and personal in combat? Maybe try a barbarian, paladin, monk, or fighter. Want to be a powerful magic wielder? Wizards, sorcerers, and warlocks are some of the more spell-focused classes. Maybe you're drawn to more stealthy play, in which case rogues and rangers might be the perfect choice. Take time to click and read through the descriptions of them, taking into account the needs of the party, what playstyles you'd enjoy, the parameters of the campaign and setting, as well as the levels you actually play as. Each class, just like the species you'll choose next, influence the ability score modifiers that make them more adept at certain skills. Your class also determines your hit dice, which essentially means how many hit points or the amount of health you start off with. Barbarians have the most, a d12, followed by fighters, paladins and rangers, a d10, Artificers, bards, clerics, druids, monks, rogues, and warlocks are lower still, a D8, and finally sorcerers and wizards have a rather squishy D6. Although at first this seems unfair, remember that all these classes are balanced. Barbarians are there to tank the damage, keeping enemies away from the wizard, who in turn is a glass cannon, a delicate but powerful damage dealer. If you're new to D&D, consider starting off with a class that is relatively straightforward, like a fighter or a rogue, as they don't rely too heavily on spells, which can be a lot to manage. If you're really struggling to pick between classes, you can always multi-class at later levels, keeping your initial class but starting the new one at first level, just so you know. Now, for you spellcasters out there, picking your first spells can feel unbelievably overwhelming, but don't worry. You just need to start with the basics. Pick a few spells that fit the flavour of your character, like healing spells if you're a cleric, or spells to control the undead if you're a wizard necromancer. You can always learn more spells as you level up. Next up is your character's background. This part tells us who your character was before they set off on this adventure. Were they a soldier, a criminal, maybe a sage or an entertainer? Mechanically speaking, backgrounds give you proficiencies in certain tools, skills, and even sometimes languages. They also add depth and personality, helping you start to think about who your character is as a person. Are they running away from their past, or are they desperately trying to redeem themselves? Backgrounds really help bring a character to life. If all this has made sense so far, do you mind leaving a little like? Maybe hitting the subscribe button and bell whilst you're there? I just rolled a 12, so this is supposed to be moderately persuasive. Alongside a profession, you can also add 2 personality traits, an ideal, a bond, and a flaw. These are simple one-sentence statements that help summarise the character you're creating. These are exceptionally helpful when you're role-playing or navigating a moral decision, as you can quickly consult these to guide your in-character choices. This leads into your character's moral alignment, which can be insinuated by the suggested ideals you've just chosen for them. Are they lawful, chaotic, neutral? Are they good or are they evil? Alignment is a guide to how your character will act, but it's not a strict rule.
It's more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
If you've written your own characteristics, you can easily fill out a short moral alignment quiz online in the mindset of your character, or to identify your own moral compass if you want to play a character with a similar code of ethics as yourself. The next part of this segment is your character's lifestyle, i.e., what level of luxury or simplicity are they accustomed to. There is also a section for a physical description of them, where you can detail visual quirks like their dappled fur, opalescent scales, or battle scars. And finally, the last segment is where you can save other character information, such as the organisations you were in league with, against, and most importantly, your backstory. Don't feel obliged to create your backstory right now. You'll have probably felt this character become more and more corporeal with every choice you've made so far, and this will only continue. Personally, I found it best to finish character creation, convene with your friends about the choices you've all made, and then percolate about your build before investing time into a backstory. Once you've finished these sections, you'll have all the information you need to create the instigating events that begin your epic tale. For advice on creative character creation and writing your own backstory, click this link here. Alright, now you've chosen your class and background, it's time to pick a species. You choose from a list of humanoid-esque fantasy creatures that not only have specific appearances, but also come with unique traits and abilities. For instance, elves are naturally stealthy, dwarves and half-orcs are generally more hardy, and dragonborn have breath weapons. When picking a species, think about how it will work alongside your class, as well as the other characters in your party. Each different species gives you a bonus to a specific ability score, which we'll be deciding next, so consider how that might align with the character you want to play. Now, let's move on to the more technical stuff, ability scores. D&D uses 6 core ability scores: Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. These scores affect your skills and your chances at success in different challenges. I know all of this looks incredibly confusing and daunting right now, but I promise by the end of this section, it will all make sense. There are a few ways you can determine these scores. You can roll dice for random numbers, specifically 4d6s, discarding the lowest roll and then adding them together, and then repeating this 6 times. You can also use the standard array or the point buy system, which lets you distribute points as you see fit. Personally, I'd say the standard array is a great starting point if you're new. It gives you a balanced set of scores without the chance of rolling a min-maxed character. With that, Think about what stats your character needs most. Strength will give you a higher likelihood of succeeding checks to do with athletics, and will add to your 2-hit modifier with melee weapons. Some classes use intelligence or charisma instead. Dexterity will go towards your acrobatics, sleight of hand, and stealth skills, and will also be used to your 2-hit modifier for ranged and finesse weapons. Your constitution modifier adds to your hit points and is generally how hardy you are. Intelligence assists on your history and investigation checks, to name a couple, and is also the spellcasting modifier for wizards. Wisdom is the spellcasting modifier for clerics, druids, and rangers, and improves a monk's armor class. This also buffs skills like animal handling and insight. And finally, there is charisma, which is the spellcasting modifier for bards, paladins, sorcerers, and warlocks, and is a boon to certain skills like deception or performance. With your stats chosen, it's finally time to talk equipment. Your class will give you a starting set of equipment, but you can also work with your dungeon master to personalize, interchange, and pick gear. This is where you will pick your weapons, armor, and other important items. Once you've done this, congratulations, you created your very first D&D character. Click the sheet icon in the top right and you'll be shown your new character sheet. There are essentially 2 main elements to the character sheet. Some areas are for the mechanics of the game, the modifiers that influence if you succeed or fail, which in turn are formulated by the choices you made in character creation. Other parts are dedicated to your inventory and what you can do with the possessions you have. To use a video game analogy, the first part would be your stats, where the game would decide, for instance, how hardy or agile you are. This would be all the calculations behind the computer screen that makes the game work. The other part will be what you'd actually see on the screen, so what armor and weaponry you have, and what special attacks or spells you've picked from a skill tree. You chose the ability scores at the top in character creation. They, alongside with the class background and species, determine your saving throws and skill modifiers. Your saving throws are for things that happen at you. For instance, you might roll a dexterity saving throw to mitigate damage if a mountain pass falls out from beneath you, or a constitution saving throw to maintain concentration on a spell whilst taking damage. Your skills usually represent something you've actively chosen to do. So if you ask the DM if you trust an NPC, they might ask you to roll an insight check. Or if you want to climb a cliff face, they'll want an athletics check. Now's the time to familiarise yourself with your new character sheet, checking your proficiencies and sorting through your spells, inventory, and features. You want to know all of these almost off by hand, as you never know when they might be applicable. And with that, we've covered the essentials, and you are well on your way to mastering the D&D character sheet, knowing how you've ended up with the stats you have, and where all your valuable loot and spells are stored. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. You are a hero just for that. If this walkthrough has been at all helpful, I'd really appreciate if you could leave me a like. And if you're just starting out in D&D or you have any questions whatsoever, leave a comment and I'm sure someone in the D&D community or myself will help you out. This video here is a guide focusing on the actual character creation of D&D, while this playlist here features real-world historical adventures that might help inspire you. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and ring the little bell so I'm not lost in the depths of the algorithm. Now, go grab those dice and create an epic tale for the ages. Adventure awaits.